You don't become a leader when people follow you. People follow you when you move. Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Follow Lead Podcast, a Christian leaders podcast powered by EBEB Solutions, energy benefits for every business. Go to ebebsolutions.com today and get your free energy audit. It can literally save you time and money. Friends, as you know, this year on the podcast, we are wrestling with 12 incredible questions, 12 questions to help you become a better leader. More than just information, what we're really talking about is transformation. And today on the podcast, we're going to wrap up January's question, how do I know if I'm a leader? We've had some incredible interviews over the month, but I wanted to end with a solo episode, something with just me and you, an opportunity to kind of lean in. And this month in particular, it felt so relevant because I just got back from spending a week in South Africa. What an amazing opportunity it was to see God at work amongst the poorest of the poor, to empower women, to feed people. And it really forced me to wrestle with the question, how do I know if I'm a leader? And if you're listening to this, you might be wrestling with that question too. And here's what I've realized is that I don't think leadership starts with a title. Instead, I actually think it starts with movement, with your movement. Most leaders are waiting for permission. They're waiting for certainty. They're waiting for credentials or even clarity. They're waiting for someone to come along and put something in their lap. But leadership is less about being recognized and more about being responsible. It's about saying, hey, I'm here as an owner, not just a watcher. I see the trash, I pick it up. I see the chair needs to be moved, I move it. Leadership is about being responsible. And that was never more clear than what I learned about Lydia's mission, the group that I was in South Africa with. One of the unique things about that ministry is that it actually started in a dump, a trash dump, with one leader, Claire, who you'll meet next week. She decided to faithfully show up and do Bible study, to pour into the women. And she'll be the first to tell you there was not a perfect plan here. She didn't have a strategic plan to grow her ministry into what it is today. But what she did have is faithful presence. As leaders, oftentimes we don't need this perfect plan. What we need is faithful presence. We need to just keep showing up. We need to move. We need to carry the ball forward. We need to decide, am I willing to do the work, to do something different, to faithfully be around and be present and to lean in to what God has for us. One of the reasons why you may not be leading people is because you may not be going anywhere. I say it at the end of every episode, following Jesus requires movement. And while I love disciplines and I think disciplines are critically important, sometimes we have to change our routines in order to get to new places. Now, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. We have to live in that tension. And just like Claire did in her story, which again, you'll hear next week, you have to show up consistently. You have to show up consistently. You have to build into the people that are there. And sometimes those people that are there aren't going to be the people that you want, but you have to keep pouring into who's there, helping them grow the way that God has called them to. And as you show up and as you build into the people, the next thing you're going to have to do is you're going to have to stay even when it's hard, when it doesn't make sense, when you don't want to. I talk to a lot of young leaders in today's climate, and one of the things that I see now more than ever before is the temptation to cut bait and run, to leave when the going gets tough. Honestly, that's sometimes the right and only option. But for most of us, we could keep moving anyway. We can stay in the hard spot. We can stay in the spot that doesn't feel glamorous. We can, again, show up, build up, stay when it's hard, and keep moving. Sometimes you don't get to know the out. Sometimes leadership is the choice to just do the hard thing day after day and see what God does next. And what's beautiful about that is that it's not a It's not an addition. It's compounding. So it's not 1 + 1 = 2. It's a life of faithfulness creates something that you could only begin to imagine. Friends, leadership is often born in the most overlooked places. Like right now, you're in a position where you could lead something, no matter what you do, no matter who you are. If you're following Jesus and you're moving forward and you're showing up and you're being faithful and you're building into people, you will lead something. Disciple making is the process of leading people to Jesus, and we're all called to be disciple makers if you are, in fact, a Christian leader. One of the things I appreciate about the way that Claire managed Lydia's mission is she leaned into the tension. Because for most of us, there is a real tension. There are cultural realities. In South Africa, that's corruption and manipulation and everybody taking stuff off the top. But in the United States, it's office politics and actual politics and everything in between. There are tensions in your calling. So you've got your cultural realities and then you've got your kingdom calling. This is your why. This is why you keep going. This is why you lean in. Most of us have a calling on our life. Now, some of us haven't done the work to discern that calling. And I want to encourage you, margin is the most common way that leaders hear from God. So if you don't have margin, you may not hear. But cultural realities should never trump our kingdom calling. Our kingdom calling is our why. It's why we keep going. And practically speaking, if you're called, you won't always feel comfortable. And if you're leading, you'll almost always be in tension. Whether you're leading a small business or a large company, there's always tension between the culture and the kingdom. There's always tension between what you want and what your employees want. Leading people is messy work. Leading people requires us to show up differently and to act a certain way and to live into that tension and be dependent upon God. How do you know if you're a leader? If you spend more time on your knees asking God for clarity than you do barking out orders. Because if you're leading, you will be living in the tension. So how do you know if you're a leader? If you're moving. If you're doing something that's worth following. You don't become a leader when people follow you. People follow you when you move. And so if you want momentum in your life, do something. Do something different. Try something different. Don't just show up every day and expect it to be handed to you on a platter. See a need, take responsibility. Create a small plan and then invite one person in and then build into that person. And be consistent. Stay present. Faithfulness over hype. It makes such a huge difference. People often reach out to me and ask about podcast stuff. After you've been podcasting as long as I have, it's really common for people to say, I want a podcast too, or I want to talk to those people, or I want to have some of those incredible guests on to interview that you've had. And this is what I always tell them. It takes a long time to become an overnight success. It takes a really long time to become an overnight success. Faithfulness, years of faithfulness, 7 years of podcasting has gotten me to where I am today. And I still don't really know where that is. But I'm faithful to the calling. And I live in the tension that sometimes the culture doesn't define success the same way the kingdom does. And that's okay. So if you're ready to take your next step in leadership, look for the need that you can begin to fill and then take responsibility. Create a small plan, invite someone to join you. Pour into that person while you're doing it and show up consistently. Faithfulness over hype. You know, all of this stuff with Lydia Mission, it's tied to why Kilimanjaro matters to me so much. About a year ago, the Lord really put on my heart widows and orphans, the groups on the margins that we read so much about in the scriptures. And as I was looking around at people who I trust, godly leaders who I trust, a lot of them were tied into Lydia's mission, which is why I got involved. One of my dear friends recommended having Mitch on the podcast, their U.S. executive director. Had Mitch on the podcast, and when I met him, instantly I knew I liked him. He's just a godly man who loves the Lord and is full of energy. We'll make sure to link to that episode in the show notes if you want to go back and listen. But Mitch offered Karen and I the opportunity to come to South Africa with him, and we instantly said yes. And then shortly after, he offered me the opportunity to raise funds and be a part of a Climb for Kids, to put more kids into uniforms, to adopt more kids, to have what they need so they can continue to grow in their own journey. This is why Kilimanjaro matters to me so much, because the Lord has called me. And I'm just going to show up faithfully, and I don't know what's going to happen. And am I nervous? Absolutely. But this is God doing something in me, stretching my faith, my courage, my obedience. And what I want to suggest to you is that God is doing the same thing in you. You just have to ask yourself, are you listening? You may not have Kilimanjaro in your future, but you have a mountain to climb for sure. It may not be physical, but it will for sure be spiritual. It'll be emotional, and it won't be for achievement. It'll be for mission. It'll be for God's people. This trip to Africa was so important to me because it really cemented my why. To see the faces of those kids, to see the faces of those women who are doing the work, to see Claire's leadership and what God is doing and how it all started with faithfully showing up in a trash dump. How do you know if you're a leader? If you're doing something that's worth following. It doesn't have to be a mountain. It just has to be the right next step. And if you're listening to this today and you're waiting to know what that mountain is, let me just assure you, take the next right step, the little step. What's one thing that you can do just this week that someone else could follow? What's one thing that you could own, take responsibility for in your workplace or your office, or heck, maybe just in your family? Next week, I'm going to have Claire on the podcast we recorded while I was with her in South Africa, and you'll hear more about this story, the story of faithful obedience. But make no mistake, Claire is not unique. God calls us all. God calls you to something incredible. What is it? What are you listening for? What are you waiting on? What's your right next step? What's your version of Kilimanjaro, of orphans and widows? Where is God calling you to be obedient? Friends, I'm praying for what God is doing in your heart. And if you have thoughts or reflections, or you want to share what that might be with me, I would love to hear from that. Tony@twmilt.com. Email me. Let me know what you're thinking. Also, if you feel so moved, I am raising money for Lydia's mission, for this Climb for Kids. The team that I'm with, we're going to raise over $100,000 to help support 1,000 new kids with uniforms so they can go to school, hope centers where kids can get fed. It's pretty incredible. So if you want to be a part of that, there's a link in the show notes. I would deeply appreciate your support. I've committed to raising $10,000 on this mission. I'm almost halfway there as this is recorded, and I'm confident with your help and faithful obedience, God will get us the rest of the way. As always, if there's anything I can do to help you, you know I'm embarrassingly easy to find. Tony@twmilt or @twmilt on Instagram. And remember, friends, if you want to follow Jesus, you must be willing to move.